Good morning. What a lovely day, spring day it is, indicated by the snow on the ground outside my house. That's not spring in Colorado. I don't know what is. It rained and it snowed last night. And then like 3 days ago, it was 80 degrees. So my name is Callie. This is my Calmeister channel. And I like to read. Shocker. I read some books this winter and I thought I would share with the wide world and the internet my opinions. And disclaimer, everything I say in this video is just an opinion. I'm just going to jump right into it. So this winter I read, sorry I sound like a fucking smoker, but that's just because it's early, 16 books this winter. Before anybody is like, oh my god, that's so many books. Like 3 of them were novellas, and I'm just also a fast reader. So at the end of last year, I finished the Folk of the Air trilogy. I actually really enjoyed that trilogy. An issue I ran into near the beginning of this year was that I was reading too fast. Like I was just kind of plowing through books. Like I wasn't skimming, I was just fast reading. I wasn't sitting with the story. It was because like my TBR is a mile high and I was so overwhelmed by how many books I wanted to get done in the year that I was just like, I just gotta read them so fast. And I have since tried to curb that. But because I read that series so quickly, I didn't spend enough time with the characters, so I decided to read the novellas. I read The Lost Sisters and How the King of Elfame Learned to Hate Stories. The Lost Sisters goes between Cruel Prince and Wicked King, and then How the King of Elfame Learned to Hate Stories goes at the end of the trilogy. I liked these novellas. I think The Lost Sisters was an interesting exploration into Tyrant's character. I think that like you can't disagree with me on this one. This one is actually a correct opinion. They're foils. Mostly because they have the exact same motivations and flaws, but they go about them in different ways. So like they both want respect and dignity in this fairy world, and Taryn seeks it out by trying to find like a whirlwind romance, and Jude seeks it out by somebody who is formidable in battle. Honestly, reading this, I was like, Taryn low-key is like your romantasy, like typical romantasy protagonist, and y'all hate her for that. So with them being sisters, it was inevitable that Taryn was going to get a redemption arc at some point. So I think that she's still getting that, because I think there's more books coming. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like that was hinted at. Because I read the Stolen Heir duology right after this. The Stolen Heir duology follows Jude and Taryn's younger brother, Oak. Now he's a teenager. Yay. And another one of those children characters that's introduced in The Queen of Nothing. And it's this duology is much more romantic, I would say, than The Folk of the Air. The Folk of the Air is less romance, more fantasy, but the romance does kind of take over a little bit, but there's not, like, the romance is kind of its own thing, you know? They're all trying to do different things, and they just kind of end up falling in love. That's my favorite flavor of romance in a book, where there's a bunch of stuff going on, but also proximity breeds love. Liked this duology. I think it's really hard to follow a series with a new series and new characters because you're trying to make them different. You don't want it to be the exact same story, because this could have been the exact same story and people probably would have ate it up. And so it is a different story. It's much more like the guy in it, Oak, obviously. I already told you it's Oak. He is a hopeless romantic. This man is very monogamous, which is very weird to the Fae. And he is a hopeless romantic through and through, just wants to be in love. He's just a lover boy, and I think it's very cute. And then the girl in it is like feral. She's from the woods, and you know, I love that vibe. Okay, I didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed The Folk of the Air, but it also just had lower stakes. So, and I like high stakes, and the romance, you know, was cute. And I think that Holly Black's characters, I love Holly Black's like the way she writes characters. I also, in my experience reading fantasy, romantasy, all of it, I find that Holly Black is done the best representation of fae and folk lore, because I've taken classes, okay, on Celtic mythology because I'm a nerd and I love the fae. And the thing about the fae is they're not beautiful humans. Or like tall humans. They're like creepy little creatures of the night. They're supposed to be more horrific than like Loverboy, you know? I think that Holly Black really captures just how like snaky and horrific the fae are. You know, she wrote the Spiderwick Chronicles too, so like she knows her fae. And I think that I have enjoyed her representation of the fae, because when I learned about Celtic mythology and I learned about the fae and all of that kind of stuff, I really wanted books where the fae were featured pretty heavily and were real in those books. But the thing is, if the fae were real, it'd be horrifying. Okay, y'all would be horrified. And like, she's the only one. I haven't read a single other fae book that has done the like fae lore and stories justice. I blame Sarah J. Maas. It's on site, because what she has done to fae folk and the like Celtic culture is, I have ancestral rage about it. It's so frustrating actually watching like fae lore get completely botched and like used as a like lazy form of world building in romantasy fantasy books. And with all that being said, I read next A Court of Frost and Starlight. I usually don't like novellas, whereas The Lost Sisters gives us an insight into Taryn and her life. And then like how the King of Elfame learns hate stories gives us an insight into Cardan and his life, which is interesting because like the books, the original trilogy is just told from Jude's perspective. So we're getting new perspective and we're also getting some exploration into the world. 1 star. This book gave me, again, this series has given me ancestral rage, okay? My ancestors are pissed. This book is just like a bunch of annoying ass people walking around and basically like humble bragging about the fact that none of their family died in the war. If I had took a shot for every time Feyre was like, this person lost somebody in the war. Not me though. I'd be dead. Like the way it's a 200-page book and I'd be dead. Like the amount of times these characters are like, I lost someone too, or I lost my soul, or Nesta's like, well, Cassian almost died. It's like everyone's like, well, somebody almost died, so I know exactly how you feel. It's like, no. Somebody just lost their husband and their brother and their sister and their cat. Like, that's so much different than you almost losing somebody, but like they didn't die by some miracle. That shit pissed me off. I think that these books had no business having a war in them because they clearly are supposed to be fluffy. I have a strong opinion about war in books. I think that if you're going to depict war in books, you have to kill characters and be horrific about it. I think that there could have been intercourt conflict, and I will die on the hill that either Tamlin or Rhysand should have been the villain. It should have been either Rhysand is fake as fuck and this like old manipulative asshole and he's the villain, or if you wanted to subvert that, make Tamlin the villain. I really genuinely think Hybern had no business being in these books. I think that if Tamlin was the villain and it was more of a civil war between the courts or like a civil dispute and you're trying to like make allies and like it was like sneaky assassins, I think that would have been so much more interesting. Again, I will die on the hill. I think that the original story should have been Tamlin and Feyre in the first book, but I think Tamlin should have been the one that was 500 plus years old and Rhysand should have been like 100 or something, or younger. Like, I don't remember the aging rules, but like he should have been basically like, he should have been young, you know, he should have been that in his party phase, and then Tamlin murders his parents and then he is forced to take on responsibility that he's not ready for, and then like having Feyre kind of integrate into this group of people and everybody trusts and loves Tamlin because he's this like super old, suave, manipulative guy who's just so sweet from the Spring Court. Like, why would Spring Court be evil? So Rhysand is the only one who questions him, and then Feyre also questions him because she dated him, you know. And it's like about him being a master manipulator, I would eat that shit up. And then again, it's not a civil war. It's a civil war, but it's more sneaky. It should have been bargains and sneaking around and like fanciful speech and dodging questions. Ugh. And I got a Christmas special where Feyre just feels bad for everybody because they had people die. And she's like, well, what did I do to deserve all of my friends to live? Plot armor, babe. I'm a completionist, unfortunately. So like I read that series and now I have to complete it. If she ever writes the final book, I might do a reading vlog of that one. Next, I read Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. I got the regular one. I have never been to a book release party. I thought that would be fun, and I realized that I had the opportunity to go to a book release, okay? So I decided I was going to have a little fun. Rebecca Yarros is from my home, Colorado Springs. This book, people talk about it all over the internet, so I feel like I don't need to go too far in depth into it in this video. A couple stories from the release party. I bought the regular version. See, no sprayed edges, no limited edition. It's just like a regular hardback. And when we first bought it a month before the release, the guy was like, are you sure you don't want to upgrade? And we were like, is it more expensive? And he said yes. And we said, yeah, no, we're not. We're going to stick with the regular one. And then at the party, we were 2 of 4 people of like the 35 that were there purchasing Onyx Storm. So everybody else was getting the fancy version, and we were just waiting in line for our regular ones. And then also when we got there and we had like little raffle tickets and stuff, and they had like activities. It was fun. I colored a picture. I invented a new species of dragon. It's pink and breathes blue fire. The lady was like, you got the regular one? Are you sure you don't want to upgrade? Like, we got shamed for getting the regular book for like 3 times. I was like, sorry, I don't want to spend $40 for some dragons to be sprayed on the edge on a book I'm not even sure I'm going to like. And this book, hear me out. For some fucking reason, I know these books are bad. Okay, I know in my heart of hearts, my soul of souls, my head of heads, my brain of brains, that these books are bad. I know they're poorly written. I know that they are trashy. But for some reason, I eat it up every time. I think that I've equated reading these books to, y'all ever have that messy friend? If you have had a lot of girlfriends, you would know that there's always that bitch that you're friends with, and you're only friends with her just because she's messy. I love messy people. I'm going to be so for real. I love hearing about messy people doing things that I would never have the gumption to do. I'm a very socially anxious person, so I live vicariously through crazy, messy people. And reading these books is like meeting that messy friend for coffee and hearing her tell you about her life. And you're sitting there going, I feel like you're the source of all your own problems. And they're never going to hear it. And they're just going to keep doing it. So she's a little dumb, but you love her regardless. And that's how I feel about these books. She's a little dumb, but I love her regardless. Like, the thing is Xaden is like, he's not egregious. And Violet is, sometimes she's really smart. Like in this book, there's a poisoning scene where I was like, damn girl, okay. Sometimes she's really stupid, which in Iron Flame, it's just the entirety of Iron Flame. She's just being stupid. Xaden is just like, he's very plain. Like, he doesn't really have personality. So he's not like Rhysand is my nemesis. I hate that man so much, and I will get into that in the next in a book coming up. But like, Xaden is just like inconsequential. The thing is this book doesn't make me feel anything. It doesn't make me feel rage. It doesn't make me feel frustrated. Usually I prefer to read books that are well written, but for some reason this one just, they go island hopping in this book. Honestly, I would rewrite it so that each island is its own part, and like they would have a mini adventure on each island, and throughout each adventure they would learn more about like the dragons and magic and the venom, and eventually getting to the end when they have to go back to Navarre, maybe because it's getting attacked. But I think that they go back to Navarre too quick. And I also thought it was weird that like they went to these islands and they were hoping to learn more about the venom, but they just didn't go to any other libraries. There's an island full of smart people doing smart people things. Let's not go to their library. There's a couple of decisions like that didn't make any sense to me. So I think that like overall, when I was reading this, what I thought it was going to be was more interesting than what I got, which is similar actually to this series, where like when I start reading it, I have like an idea of what I'm getting myself into. And then that one just disappointed me because it wasn't what I thought I was getting myself into, and it was worse. I digress. Next I read 6 of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I liked this book, 4 stars. First thing I didn't like. I didn't like that Nina Matthias's stories were told like completely through flashback. I think that it lost me on a lot of the emotional impact of their history and their story. Like, it feels like there's a prequel missing. I didn't like that. I think, like I said, I think it lost me on a lot of its like emotional impact. I think that it just kind of fell flat because of it, because we had modern Matthias instead of the two of them slowly falling in love over time. And then my other critique, there's just a couple points where the dialogue was like really under tagged. Like, there's just not a lot of dialogue tagging in some of the more bantery spots, and I would like not, I like couldn't figure out who was fucking talking. So that was annoying for me. But it was only a couple spots, so it wasn't like too egregious. And then my final critique was like, there's no way these kids are 17. To me, they seem like 19, 20, 21-ish, because it seems like, you know, new adults, them figuring out themselves in this new world and their new life or whatever. Like, it felt very like transitional into adult, and I think that 18, 19, 20 are more transitional ages than 17, in my personal humble opinion. But I give it 4 stars. I still really like Six of Crows. I would probably recommend it to people if they asked me for a recommendation. I would never recommend Six of Crows to a fantasy reader, but I would recommend it to like people who like heists, you know, because it's way more, oh my god, because it's way more like heisty than fantasy-y. Like, there's a little bit of fantasy and like year to parem, the like drug that they're trying to get the formula for or whatever, and only affects people with magical powers. But I think ultimately it is not very fantastical. It's more just like a heist in a fake world, which I thought was fun. I liked the world building. I liked the characters a lot. Next I read My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh. I loved this book. I loved it on like a I don't know. I was trying to put like a word to the level I loved it at, but I don't know the word, guys. The reason I like this so much is because it's just about this woman who's terrible. She's fat phobic and she is mentally ill, and she takes out a lot of her problems in other people. She's incredibly privileged. It's like there's all these things that are like problematic a little bit with this woman, but ultimately it never apologizes for her being horrible. I think that there's this like goodness that's associated with femininity and this like expectation that women are supposed to be good and holy and pure all the time. And like I see it in ACOTAR, for example. Like, Feyre is like this perfect person, and she's like always so perfect and prim and proper. And it's just like, that's not relatable. And honestly, like, if you're not like that, it makes you feel like you're the worst person to ever have existed. And so I find it really nice to just read about somebody who is horrible and be like, yeah, you know, she's horrible, but I still was like rooting for her. Like, I still wanted her to get better. I don't know. It's just very unapologetic and very fascinating. And I think you're not supposed to read it and like the character. And also, like, oh my God, I love a horrible woman. You know what I mean? Like, I love it. I love reading a book about horrible women. I love when she is somebody that most people would dislike, because I think that, like, again, women aren't really given a lot of space to be morally gray or just like problematic. Women have to be like perfect examples and role models, and I feel like there's a lot of places I could take this, but ultimately I give this book 5 stars because I really just think that the main character is just a bad person, and you're not ever supposed to, it never once like apologizes for her being bad, and never once tries to justify her badness. It just like, yeah, here she is, this is how she is, and it never once pretends that she's anything else. And I think that is, it's refreshing to read, and it's also like almost reassuring that like, hey, you're doing okay, you're not acting like this lady. Next I read A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. This book, like I said, I'm a completionist. Unfortunately, I need to learn how to DNF. I'm on my journey. Okay, I'm on a journey. I did listen to a lot of this book. I have those like free Spotify hours that I was using, but this book peeved me because you have a really good, strong story of Nesta getting out of her situational depression. I think that story was like well done. It was relatable in the beginning. I was like, yeah, Sometimes you just don't want to do anything and life sucks and you just want to drink your problems away. Like, that's valid. It's problematic, but it's valid. You know what I mean? And then it just like devolves. It's like we saw way too much of the OG cast. Rhysand was just a villain the whole book. And it's just like, I already wasn't really rooting for this man because he annoys me. And this book really just solidified the fact that I think that he's a villain. The way that he treated Feyre was unforgivable. The way that he treated Nesta, again, unforgivable. Like, he was just a horrible person this whole book. And it's just like the amount of times we get like a Cassian POV where he's like, Rhys is the best of all of us because of what he did under the mountain. Shut the fuck up. Under the Mountain was so long ago. And again, I think that two things could exist at once. Somebody can be self-sacrificial and horrible at the same time. And you don't need to pretend they're a good person just because they sacrifice themselves. At that point, it just feels like a manipulation tactic. There's people who do that simply because they want you to tell them that they're a good person. My biggest gripe with people in general is the amount of times you have to tell somebody you're kind, or the amount of times you have to tell somebody you're self-sacrificial or you don't think about yourself. Or if you have to tell people you're a good person, I don't believe you're a good person. You know what I mean? And this book feels very much like, no, I promise, I swear he's a good person. It's just like, no, you have to show me that you're a good person for me to believe you're a good person. If I got on this channel and I started just yapping about how good of a person I am, you're like, okay, but who the f are you? It's one of those things where, yeah, the more you have to reassure other people it exists, then no one's telling you that themselves, which means it's probably not true. You are not kind because you tell everybody you're kind. This book pissed me off. It had no business being as long as it was. I have read this whole series, and I firmly believe that every Sarah J. Maas book I've read, you could cut half of any of her books and it's to be the same book. You know what I mean? It's just like, this book was incredibly egregious in its like repetitive nature. Like the amount, like the one that gets me that I use as like an example every time I rant about this book to my friends is there's the scene with the mask and the dead people and the bog, and Nesta has the scene with the mask that's crazy, and it's like kind of a cool scene. And then literally a chapter later, Nesta's taking a bath at the House of Wind, and she ducks her head underwater and gives us a play-by-play of the scene with the mask that we read a chapter ago. What the fuck? I think that's why me and Sarah J. Maas's writing are on, like, we're beefing, is because the amount of times this woman just repeats herself and re-explains a scene so that you really truly get what she was trying to go for there. Do you see what she was going for? Do you see what she was what she was trying to say here? Like, it's crazy, right? The way that these characters, shut your trap, Dingus. It's so long. It has no business being this long. The Trove plot had literally no business being in this book. It feels so convoluted. It's barely in the middle. It's like she forgets about it so that Nesta and Cassian can play on the carousel with how much she's riding him. And then she's like, oh yeah, the Trove plot. And so she has to go find the Trove again. And then there's like, she's also discovering her powers. And then there's also the pregnancy plot, which... so abortions just don't exist. The thing is, pregnancy plot didn't need to be complicated. It also, Feyre didn't need to be in this book. Truly, 100%, I mean to the bottom of my heart, Feyre and Rhysand had no business being in this book. And the thing is like, this book would have been so much better for me if I was just reading about Nesta, going to training, making friends, learning to love, figuring out her powers, and like finding her place in this new world. That would have been so much more interesting to me, personally. In my opinion, either choose the plot, like the Trove plot, either make it about the Trove or make it about the pregnancy or make it about Nesta. It's like three big plots that are all fighting for page space, and it just comes across as repetitive and melodramatic. This was a 2-star read. And the only thing I do want to give Sarah J. Maas her cookies for is the fact that when she writes about like training, she actually acknowledges how hard it is to bring your body back up to like peak condition, especially if like you haven't had proper nutrition for a while. But I think that like overall as like a book, like the characters annoying and flat, they have no personality. She gives them these little hobbies. Oh, you read romance, because she's just like the audience for real, or she dances or she paints, and it's just like the hobby is supposed, it's like a placeholder for personality. And so like the character doesn't actually have personality, she just can dance really well. Okay, Okay. She also mixes Valkyries in. Like, she really just kind of puts a bunch of mythologies in a hat and pulls them out, and doesn't really actually world build. She just kind of like, oh, we need female warriors. Oh, the Valkyries are a female warrior race. Let's just use them. I can see an argument for all of the mythologies existing at once, because I thought that would be cool at one point when I was a kid. And so I would, what's it smell like? Like, I would like to see that done, but I'd like to see it done well. It like half-asses each mythology it includes and just doesn't, ugh, it's melodramatic as fuck. Next, I read The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I think I have some controversial opinions on this book. First and foremost, reading it feels like you're reading a history textbook, but all the names are different. It's not Japan and China, it's Nakan and Mugen. It feels like it's putting fictional characters in real world events and then just telling us what those characters think of those real world events. And I don't know if I like that world building. I like the themes that she's exploring. I think they're important themes to explore, and I think that this book is a good place for a lot of people who don't have a prior knowledge or understanding of these themes. I think that it's a good introduction into talking about things like colonialism and war crimes. And like I said with Sarah J. Maas, I was like, if you're going to write a book with war, it has to be horrific, because war is horrific. This book, it doesn't sugarcoat war, which I like. It's really well written and very competent, which I like. I didn't like that it felt like a history lesson rather than a story. And I also didn't like that I didn't like the characters. Not because Rin is morally gray, okay? Like I said, I love a horrible woman. I will read the fuck out of a horrible woman, okay? I just don't think Rin is a fully realized person. She read like a concept, and a lot of the characters in this book felt like concepts. I don't know. It just felt very much like there wasn't a lot of nuance explored in the rage. It was just an angry book, and I think that like anger, especially feminine rage, needs to be explored with more nuance, because I think that feminine rage comes to places that I think deserve to be talked about, right? I don't know. I think that this book does something for a lot of people, and I think that it's a good book, and I think it's a valuable book. The other thing I didn't like about it was like the way that the theme of this book is like the Kool-Aid man. It just like bursts into your room and smacks you across the head. I genuinely think that art is subjective, and if you are so afraid that your book is going to be like have people read it wrong, then you aren't writing right. You're not supposed to write a book and expect everybody to get the same thing out of it. And that's part of like critique and part of art, is everybody is going to get something different out of it. And if you're trying to make sure so hard that everybody gets, I had to take a break because my cat's feeding alarm went off, and I do not remember what I was talking about. I was talking about the Poppy War, I know that, and I feel like I was making a really good point. This book was 4 stars. Like I said, I think it's a really well written book. I think it's a good book. It may not be for me. Next, I read Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo, because if you're gonna read Six of Crows, you're gonna read Crooked Kingdom. You like that? Anyway, I liked this book a lot. It's since it's a duology, it's the end of the series. I don't think I'm gonna keep reading into Nina's story, because I didn't really like Nina that much. I expected to relate to her more, because as a teenager I was constantly looking for a girl that wasn't 5 nothing and the size of a toothpick. I think as a teenager I would have really appreciated that. Fantastic. I think that their romance and their like character dynamic is so well written. I love the way that like their characters bounce off of each other, and the way that like they each have a lot of traumas, and the traumas agree with one another, and so the way that their relationship grows over time is very natural and very like this is peak romance to me. I love when romance is incredibly subtle and incredibly personalized to the characters themselves. And I think that like these books, the romances they have in them are all unique and subtle, and each character is written alongside the other character to sort of like play off of each other. And I think that I like that. It also has a bittersweet ending. There's a few character endings that, maybe aren't the most satisfying, but they like are the most needed. One character ending explores the cycle of abuse, and another character ending explores, an alternate way to have a relationship with each other with trauma that can hinder certain aspects of a relationship. But this book, I feel like it was mostly about the characters, and then the heist stuff that was going on in the background was more of a distraction, not for the reader, but for the characters, so they didn't have to face each other. I think, we get Kaz has a really big character arc in this book. He, has to learn how to open up and be part of the crew, and my main criticism of the first book was they didn't feel like teenagers. In this book they felt like teenagers. I feel like they finally got to be kids in a lot of instances, and I think the biggest piece of that is someone's father shows up, and with having this dad there, you really recognize that these are just a bunch of kids doing their best with what they got, and the dad is there he's just like everybody's dad now, and I loved him. He was so sweet. My new favorite dad character, genuinely, because he reminds me a lot of my grandpa. Not very serious all the time, but an incredibly caring person. Anyway, I just really liked this dad character and what he offered to these kids. And it was a very wholesome story with a lot of very dark things happening in it. And it had a lot of very sweet endings for all these characters and a lot of hope. But it's still very bitter because they still went through so much to get to where they are. And that's my favorite type of story, actually. That's my favorite type of reading experience, is reading about characters that are put through the ringer, and that they're closed off and they're traumatized and they have all these bad things going on for them. And then by the end, it's we went through a lot of shit and we're still kind of sad about some of the things that happened, but maybe it is going to be okay. And I think that is just, I connect with that writing a lot more than in pretty much anything else. So this one gets a 5 stars from me. Next, I read A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle L. Jensen. This book almost taught me how to DNF. I saw this book at the bookstore. Okay, I go to my local bookstore and I peruse. And at the bookstore, if you've ever been, I don't know if you've ever been to a bookstore, but they have those little note cards. The workers will write their recommendations and they'll put cards on the shelves with the book. So you can get worker recommendations without having to talk to anybody because they know book people. So this one was one of those ones. It had a little card, and it said had a really dynamic, interesting FMC and a cool world. It had all these recommendations, right, written onto it. And I said, oh, this sounds interesting. So I put it on my TBR, and I finished A Court of Silver Flames and The Poppy War and Crooked Kingdom. I finished all these series, right? But I needed a break after I read The Poppy War. I was all right, I need a break. This is a lot. That's a lot for me. I need a break. Well, let me tip my toes back into romantasy, right? Because I've only read the Empyrean series and Akotar and The Folk of the Air. That's the only romantasy. Folk of the Air isn't even romantasy. I've only read that stuff. So I was well, I can't dog on romantasy yet. I haven't read enough to dog on it. And I read this book and it has inspired me to do an entire deep dive into romantasy. Yep, that is a video upcoming probably December of this year because I have a lot of books to get through. I was reading this book and I almost sat down with this camera and this mic and got on my soapbox and talked about how much I hate romantasy just because of one book. This book made me so unreasonably upset simply because it is a poor representation of feminism. It's just I'm forced to be married, but I want to be a warrior. That's, I guess, valid, but is that it? It was just so flat for me. The characters had no personality. It was so formulaic to the point of where I want to know that it's formula, but not recognize that it's formula. You know what I mean? And this book. I could go on about generic naming conventions in books because her name's Freya. Oh my god, a book featuring Norse mythology with a FMC named Freya. I never would have guessed. And then the guy's Bjorn, which I just couldn't I couldn't get around the fact that that's PewDiePie's child's name. On one hand, I'm not really into Norse mythology. I don't find it compelling. On the other hand, this book is just so flat. I think that part of the frustration with this magic system is a similar frustration I had with the Poppy Wars magic system, and that's that you call upon the gods and they offer you an inkling of their power. I just not into that. I think as a magic system, there's just something about it that reads very like, well, they gotta have magic powers, so I guess like, you know, they can be like demigods. I didn't like the man because the entire time he's just being thirsty, and I didn't like the girl because the entire time she's just being thirsty. It's not romance. Okay, hear me out. I want to like romance. I want to be one of the girls that likes romance. But the thing is, every time I read a romance, it's not romantic. It's not personalized to these very specific characters. It's just a bunch of like, oh, he bought me roses and chocolate on Valentine's Day. That means it's romance. Like, it's not, I feel like romance is, as like a concept, is something that should not be performed the same for everybody, if that makes sense. I think that like there's certain things that are romantic, calling someone beautiful, you know, telling someone you love them, that they're the only person for you, blah, blah, blah. But I think that there's something very like personal that like even in like real life romance that I think is lost a little bit. Like the amount of times I had some man tell me, I've never met a girl like you. Like, shut the fuck up. Of course not, because I'm me and they're them. It's one of those things where it's like, that's not personal. That's not a compliment. It's so generic and vague. I feel like the romance is just vague. It's like she has a mouth on her and he has a muscle. And it's just like, okay, but like what else is there? I don't understand the obsession. I don't understand. Like, Rhysand is not a person and Xaden is not a person. This man Bjorn is not a person. They're just like these concepts of a man that just gets you off and serves the purpose of like projection. And that's not romantic to me. It's just at this point lust. Not to get on my high horse or anything. This book pissed me off that so much. And so I will be doing a deep dive into romantasy as a genre. I am determined at this point to find at least one romantasy book that I like. Because so far, I could talk about this for hours, so I'm just going to make a whole video about romantasy and fantasy and like the genre itself. But I need to read a lot more books in order to make that video, so it will be coming out fairly late this year. Next, I read the Hunger Games trilogy. I'm still in Mockingjay, but I'm going to finish it soon, so I'm just going to include it as the completed. I have the full trilogy here. I'm not going to talk about these books extensively because I am reading them for a video. Because Sunrise on the Reaping came out this year. I thought my camera just died, but it would have gone black if it did that. Next, and then finally, last on my winter reads list is actually a reread. I reread Mistborn. When I first got my hands on Mistborn, I was 17, and a friend of mine in my math class, I remember he was in my math class and I was talking to him about like not having anything to read. And he was asking me like what kind of books I liked, because a lot of people I knew in high school read. I went to a very nerdy high school and everybody was a reader. And so I was talking to him about books and he was like, if you like fantasy, you should read Mistborn. And I said, okay. And then I forgot about it. And then I was like, you know what? I actually do need something to read, but they didn't have it at the school library. So I had to go to the public library. I got this book from the library and I plowed through the trilogy. The ending of the trilogy has followed me for, at this point, 8 years. I remember loving the series. I've been recommending it to death ever since I was a teenager. Because I love these books so much, I thought, you know what, I want to add them to my collection. The thing is, when you think about a book on your collection, you'd think like someone would buy a special edition, right? I did not do that. I just bought a regular paperback because I believe in paperback supremacy. Let me just show you. It just sits open. You can just set it down and read like that. Are you kidding? I love that. Upon my reread, I listened to most of it actually using the Spotify feature because I borrowed this out to a friend. This book, upon reread, it still holds up. I still love it. The reason I chose to reread it actually was because I kept recommending it to death to my friends, and then my one friend started reading it, and she was talking about it, and I went, yeah, so I don't remember anything that happened in that book. It's a great heist story. The magic system is one of the most in-depth I've ever read. Obviously, that's Brandon Sanderson's, like, you know, claim to fame is his magic systems. The characters are all so real, and it's such a well-written story. My only complaint now that I've read it as an adult is, where are all the women? ¿Dónde están las mujeres? Because Vin is the only major female character in this book. There are other women characters, but they're very background. Like Breeze, Dox, Hammond, Club, Spook, Kelsier, the Lord Ruler, Marsh, every other obligator. Everyone's a man, except for Vin. And I think that Vin is a very well-written character, though. Like, reading as a girl, like when I was 17 and reading this, are you kidding me? Vin is 17. My 17-year-old ass said, she's me. And everybody I've recommended who read this book really relates with her. So she's a very well-rounded woman who a lot of women are going to relate to. But I still think that it could use more women as part of the crew. Anyway, that's my only really gripe with it, is the fact that there's no female characters. But it's still, like, the plot is, like, seamless. The magic system is interesting and unique. It's, like, its relationship with religion is interesting and unique. It also does lack diversity. Anyway, that is everything I read this winter. And an hour later, she finishes. And she still has books to talk about, because she's going to do spring TBR. Oh, before we get to TBR, let's talk about what I'm currently reading. There are 2 books I'm currently reading, one of which I do expect to be done with by the time this video goes out. And that is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I have this one from the library on my Kindle app. This book is similar pacing issues that I had with The Poppy War, where it just like has a lot of, it's like front loaded with a lot of information, and then it like jumps through this child's childhood and then puts them into the school. And I feel like it doesn't, I feel like someone's childhood doesn't even need to be in chronological order with the rest of the story. Anyway, I think that could have been flashback, but I digress. I'm having issues with that, but I am enjoying Babel a lot more than I was enjoying The Poppy War. I'm only like 20% through, and it's due Saturday, so I will be finishing that book as fast as humanly possible. But I think that the book is very, it's like I said, she's a good writer, and it has a lot of historical facts. Something I found a little bit odd is that she's using historical anachronism on purpose in this story. Like, that is a little blurb at the beginning saying like, hey, this isn't perfectly historically accurate because I wanted these things to exist in the story. She said, actually, I'm rewriting history for the sake of my fiction plot. And the thing is, on one hand, you could argue that that's weird. On the other hand, it's fiction. You know, like, we can imagine a fake world for ourselves. And I think acknowledging that the world is fake is really the only thing you can do if you're going to make it fake, right? So I am liking Babel a lot more. I have high expectations for the rest of the book. I also have no idea what it's about. I went into this book blind. All I knew is that the Tower of Babel is from the Bible, and I knew it was dark academia. The other book I am currently reading is this one, Deathless Divide by Justina Ireland. I will not shut up about this duology. I read Dread Nation last year. It is one of my only 5-star reads from last year because it was so good. This does female rage so well. Every time I want to use an example of female rage and alternate history, this duology. I'm only on page 95 of this book because it's obviously, I own it, so I keep putting it aside to finish my library books. Yeah, so this one is, after I'm done with Babel, after I plow through Babel, we're getting back to her. The books take place during Civil War era America. The Civil War ended because there was a zombie outbreak, so people of color, and more specifically mostly black people, are going to these schools and training in order to be like shambler killers. They call them shamblers. And they are then forced to work for white people, like rich white people, to protect them from the zombies. So Jane McKean, our main character, is a black girl who goes to Miss Preston's, and she is learning how to be a shambler hunter. And she's in a world that does not value her. These 2 books explore the racism in America during the 1800s so unapologetically and so literally. It talks about integration schools. A lot of indigenous people in America and Canada were forced to go to schools to indoctrinate and basically make them integrate into white society, so Christianize them basically. The other thing I like that Justina Ireland does is at the end of the book, She gives you a little reading list of what you can read further to explore into these historical topics, more historical references for this book. This book is fiction. It's alternate history, but it has a lot of roots in real history, and it doesn't use historical anachronism to tell its story. It just adds zombies to Civil War era America. But the whole motivation of the book is Jane is motivated to go find her mother back on the plantation that she is from. So she was taken from her plantation where her mother is and put in Miss Preston's, and the entire motivation of both books is Jane wanting to protect her mother. Never once is she like, I need to save the world, I need to stop the zombie outbreak. She's just like, I just want to be with my mom and be safe. And I think that is such, there's so much heart in the story because of that, because it's not about saving the world, it's about being with the people you love. It pulls me back to my criticism of ACOTAR. Like, you don't need world-ending villains. You have a story right here with the characters trying to be around the people they love and exploring their mental illness. This is about being around your family and being with the people you love and not getting separated. And Jane is faced with so much racism and so much sexism too, because she's a woman. This is feminine rage, because Jane is a sensitive, caring person who is just angry that the world is treating her in a way that she would have never treated it. This book is narrated by two different narrators, because Dread Nation is just Jane. This one has Jane and a friend of hers, and the voices interchange so well. You always know who's talking. And I just gotta offer some flowers for that, because that is so difficult. I'm so mad that these are not like more famous, because they're so well written. But this isn't my currently reading. That is coming up next. Like I said, it's gonna be Babel, and then it's gonna be probably Mockingjay, and then Deathless Divide. I'm gonna plow through these in 2 weeks. That's my goal. 3 books, 2 weeks. Crazy. She's crazy, I know. All of that being stated, it's time to get into the TBR. The way I just recorded all of that. TBR time. And now my audio is back. So, first, I'm going to go over my library. Let's pull up the Libby app. So what I currently have checked out. I have the Spell Shop. This one is due in 10 days. I saw this one on a list. I think one of the top fantasy or romantasy of 2024, I believe, on Goodreads. And because I'm now like fully invested in exploring romantasy as a genre and like trying to figure it out, like what do I like, what don't I like, and it was one I had never heard of, right? And I was like, oh, maybe this one will be good. It's a short book, so it'll be a quick read. And The Ministry of Time, science fiction. I love science fiction. It's also apparently Barack Obama's favorite book of like 2022. So, okay, thanks for the rec, Obama. Thanks, Obama. And then I've been reading Imminent by Luis Elizondo. This is a book about UFOs, and the guy worked in the government and is giving us a whole rundown on his exploration into UFOs and how he found them and or didn't find them, and just a bunch of maths and facts, nonfiction, memoir style. I like this book. It's a little bit too pro-government for me. My biggest issue when we talk about things like UFOs and aliens is I think that we impart a lot of human emotions and traits onto them, whereas like they're aliens. There's like infinite possibilities. These guys could be violent patriarchal societies, or they could be literally anything else, right? Like they could be accidentally turning on our nuclear weapons. It doesn't have to be on purpose. It could be accidentally hurting people. Like none of this stuff needs to have a sinister motive. It could have a sinister motive, and I'm not going to rule that out. But I think that people are ruling out the fact that it could also not be a sinister motive. They're just assuming, oh, they turn on our nuclear weapons, they're violent. Like what if they're non-violent? What if they're pacifist people and we're the violent ones? You know what I mean? And then I have Funny Story, the audiobook, because my friend convinced me that I should try it out and give it a go. So, and it had no wait time, not a single wait time. So I got that book. Now, what do I have on hold at the library that I will be getting during the spring? We have Feybound by Sarah El Arifi. This was recommended by Willow Talks Books. I just take recommendations from booktubers. Gonna be so for real. She was talking about how like she has disliked a lot of romantasy, same with me, and this was one that she genuinely liked and like had a lot of positive things to say about it. So I was like, you know what? All right, I'm gonna give that a go. Next, I have on hold Grave Empire by Richard Swan. This is a fantasy book. I don't remember what it's about. Let me see if I can pull it up. Blood once turned the wheels of empire. Now it is money. A new age of exploration and innovation has dawned, and the empire of the wolf stands to take its place as the foremost power in the known world. Glory and riches await. But dark days are coming. A mysterious plague has broken out in the pagan kingdoms to the north, while in the south, the empire's proxy war in the lands of the wolfmen is weeks away from total collapse. Worse still is the message brought to the empress by two heretic monks who claim to have lost contact with the spirits of the afterlife. The monks believe this is the start of an ancient prophecy heralding the end of days, the Great Silence. It all falls to Renata Rayner, a low-ranking ambassador to an enigmatic and vicious race of mermen, to seek answers from those who still practice the arcane arts. But with the road south beset by war and the empire on the brink of supernatural catastrophe, soon there may not be a world left to save. I thought the cover was pretty. And I also thought that sounded interesting. Another one by Willow Talks Books. She was recommending this book as like just a general fantasy read. And I was like, you know what? Color me intrigued. So I put it on hold at the library. Next, I have Blood Over Bright Haven on hold, 7 weeks out. This one was recommended by Ed and Jonas as well, but there's been a lot more people that have talked about this book since, and I just keep seeing it everywhere as a really good book. I don't know if it's romantasy or just fantasy, and then I also have The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. It's in 10 weeks, so that'll be near the end of the spring that will hit my bookshelf. Anyway, that's all my library TBR. I'm going to try not to add to that. The first one on the TBR is obviously going to be The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. I'm rereading the whole trilogy, so this is obviously next up on the list. I'm probably going to jump into this one probably right after Deathless Divide, if I can, because my friend is waiting on me. Next on my TBR, this one is for my fantasy video. I'm just going to keep talking about a video I'm making in 8 months, but that is going to be The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. This, I'm genuinely only reading for that video. I don't really have an interest in reading it from what I know about it, but I'm not going to go too in depth into what I know about it because again, I want to save that for a video, but this is my friend's copy. She lives across the hall from me. There's also a lot of controversy surrounding it because like the third book is just never done. He just hasn't completed it. It's been like a decade, which that's crazy. Next on the list I have Heavenly Tyrant by Chiran J. Zhao. This is the sequel to Iron Widow. I read Iron Widow last year and I enjoyed it. There's a few elements of it I didn't like, but I liked that the FMC was low-key evil, and I like the chrysalises. I think that it's a really cool science fiction. I'm really interested to see where the book goes. It has a non-traditional love triangle, which I thought was really interesting. Well, I remember reading Iron Widow and I was like, I need the sequel now. And it came out this year. Or last Christmas. Heavenly Tyrant. My friend who borrowed me Name of the Wind is waiting on this book, so I might move this one before Name of the Wind. Next, this book is one that I'm actually probably most excited for in this entire TBR. Okay, and that's why it's near the beginning. This, I feel like I need to tell a story. Last year, I did a writing workshop with Pocket MFA. If you've heard of them, you've heard of them. If you haven't, you haven't. And I was working under this author. One other book he recommended I read because I liked Justine Ireland so much was this book called Ring Shout by P. Djeli Clark. I loved that book. It's a novella. And my biggest criticism of that book was that it wasn't an 800-page epic fantasy. I was like, where is the rest? And I was at the Tattered Cover. If you know Denver, Tattered Cover. And I saw this, A Master of Djinn by P. Djeli Clark. Oh my God, my main man, my hair looks different. Myself feels different. And you know why? There's going to be some jump cuts. I recorded this whole section of the video. I was just putting it into my editor and realized I recorded this whole section of the video on my mic, but not on my camera. I never hit record on the camera. I luckily looked this up, so now I know that it's A Master of Djinn by P. Djeli Clark. A Master of Djinn, it takes place in Cairo in 1912 following Fatma el-Sha'arawi. And she is the youngest woman working for the Ministry of Alchemy, Enchantments, and Supernatural Entities. Certainly not a rookie, especially after preventing the destruction of the universe last summer, which is the a dead djinn in Cairo short story, which is what this this full-length novel is based on, or like continues. It's steampunk, it's alchemy. I'm really excited for this because it's right up my alley. It's a murder mystery. Literally ever since I was a child, someone would be like, what type of books do you like to read? And I'd be like, murder mysteries. So it's a murder mystery, it's steampunk, it's a little bit of fantasy, has a female protagonist, and I don't know, the whole concept is like right up my alley. So I'm incredibly excited for this one. Like I said, most excited for Dead Djinn in Cairo. That is the short story, A Master of Djinn. I'm incredibly excited for A Master of Djinn. So following A Master of Djinn, I am going to read The Resurrectionist by E.B. Hubsbeth. This book is the lost work of Spencer Black. Let me just show you a page of this, because it essentially is exploring fictional and like folklore-y type creatures, fairies. It's like a field guide and like almost sciencey book. Oh, here's Siren Oceanus. And it's like a mixture, I think, of fiction and fact, because I think Spencer Black existed. It says The Legacy of a Madman. So it's exploration of like mythical creatures and their potential existence, and this man basically turning it into like, here's the anatomy of like folklore characters. And I asked my sister last year because she was asking me what I wanted for my birthday. And I said, any historical fiction that you think I would enjoy. And so she purchased this for me. And so I'm really excited to read this one. I feel like it would go with A Master of Djinn really well. I don't know. Like they give me a similar vibe. So I want to read them back to back. Really excited to get into this one. She's skinty. The next book on this list is going to be On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. I read a short story written by him last summer, and I just fell in love with the way that he writes anything and everything. And then I saw quotes of this book floating around on Pinterest, and so I decided to put it on my list. And then I was at my parents' house, cat sitting and chicken sitting, and I raided my sister's room because she's away at college, and I found this in there, and I said, oh my god, I'm gonna take that. So I took this from my sister. I love this type of book. I like that it's profound and that it like really like speaks to you on an emotional level, like while you read it. Problem is I do tend to lean into my more exciting quote unquote books, you know, plot heavy, escapism, science fiction, fantasy, before I'll pick something like this up. So I have to be more intentional about reading it. So I'm going to try this spring to be really intentional to read this book. It also gives me spring vibes. I'm going in fairly blind. It's a letter from a son to a mother who cannot read. Oh, that's so beautiful. That in and of itself is a line of poetry. Anyways, I'm really excited just to read the lyricism that this book is certain to be. The next on this list is going to be Severance by Ling Ma, not to be confused with the hit Apple Plus TV show. It's really funny. I was looking it up. It was published in 2018, but has like a pandemic-esque apocalypse. So it's like this lady predicted the freaking future. Crazy. But essentially it's there's this girl who lives and works in New York, and a pandemic of sorts, so it basically sweeps throughout the city and people die, and then she gets caught up in this group. Their goal is to start a new society. My friend actually brought this to me and is making me read it. I saw on her Goodreads that she wanted to read it, and then she started reading it, and then I put it on my want to read list because it sounded interesting. And then she came over to my house and dropped this off and said, here you go, I saw you wanted to read it. So here we are. She said that she loved it because it's like a character-centered apocalypse story. It explores one woman and her experience, and it does a really good job of exploring that woman and her experience. Anyway, the next book I'm going to be reading is Changing Vision by Julie E. Cernita. This is the sequel to a book I read last year called Beholder's Eye. Essentially, the story goes, back in 2024, I had this goal of reading more science fiction written by women, because I feel like there's just not a lot of science fiction that I can think of off the top of my head that's written by women. But anyway, that was my goal last year because I like writing science fiction. So of course, I digress. Anyway, I read the first book. The writing is it was published in the 90s, and you can kind of tell in the 90s without social media, my attention span could certainly handle these books, but like as you know, myself in the 2020s, it is more difficult. I also just think that the formatting of mass markets might not be very agreeable with me and my attention span. I have a hard time focusing just in general, but I'm excited to read this. The like science is really interesting. So the story follows isnt and she's part of this shape-shifting species that they can like absorb matter or release matter in order to do, because you need only a certain amount of matter to like make yourself look like a certain species. But it makes them very dangerous because they can like kind of eat, basically absorb anything. So there's like this oncoming threat in the first book of something that's just kind of going throughout the universe, eating and absorbing as much as possible. And so isnt and her sisters, it's an only female society, which isnt and her sisters are kind of on the run from this threat. And also isnt befriends a human named Paul Regum. And this book takes place 50 years after the end of the last book, which had a crazy ending. But they're just kind of like living on the fringe. They're having a little content life for the last 50 years. But then a new diplomatic nightmare. So they were hunting isnt's species in the last book, and that was never resolved in that book. But in this one, the hunters come back. So I'm kind of excited. Now, the next book requires a story as well. Back when I was a child, I was obsessed with Sacagawea. Okay, she was like my favorite figure in history. Sacagawea was my hero. I wanted to be her when I grew up. As an adult, I've realized I don't really know anything about her. So I found this book at the tattered cover. I was just wandering around perusing, as you do when you get bored, and I saw the Lost Journals of Sacagawea. I didn't even read the back. I went, oh my god, I need to know about Sacagawea, and I grabbed it and I bought it. I'm so easily influenced sometimes, especially when it comes to books. I have a really hard time holding back. But anyway, I was reading the back, and it's a mixture of fiction and fact, where Sacagawea is personified by the work, but it's not actually written by Sacagawea. It's by Deborah Magpie Erling. In this visionary novel, acclaimed Indigenous author Deborah Magpie Erling brings this mythologized figure vividly to life, casting an unsparing light on the men who brutalized her and recentering Sacagawea as the arbiter of her own history. I know, I'm very interested to see where the story takes me. The next book, I was driving, and I was listening to this video by Willow Talks Books, and she was talking about how she doesn't really like a lot of romantasy, but she was like, here's a few romantasies that are like actually good. And I said, okay, I'm sat. I'm also driving, so I have to be sat. Now, I do plug in these videos to my aux cord, but I don't watch videos while I drive. Okay, keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. It's like having a conversation in the car. She recommended a lot of books, and one of them was The Hurricane Wars, which I thought sounded interesting based on her description of the Hurricane Wars. And so I put it on my list, and then I arrived at my destination, which was Target, and I went in to buy cat food, and I was like, maybe I'll just look at the books real quick. I just want to look. With no intention of buying a book. And then I saw this special edition with the sprayed purple edges and the like moon on the side, and I said, oh my god, no, I'm being influenced again. I'm not one who just buys books just because they're beautiful, but oh my god, I love a purple and a yellow concept, and it was on sale. It was $15 instead of $20. And you know what? Anyway, this book is about two people on opposite sides of a war, so it's enemies to lovers, and I am an enemies to lovers apologist. I do like enemies to lovers when done correctly and when done well. I think that it can work and can explore our, the darkness of ourselves and still be, seen as lovable. Anyway, they're both like opposing sides of a war, and their magic is the only thing that like could win for their side, and now they have to like fight each other, but maybe they don't hate each other. And I think that that's beautiful. Okay. And just like the cover, like I said with the Fate Inked in Blood, I'm on a journey now to find a romantasy I genuinely like and enjoy. And like I liked Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, but that's my trash. Okay, I'm enjoying that because it's trash. I want a book that actually like gives me something to root for, and I can be like, no, read this. So I'm really hoping this one's good because I bought it. The next one, so I bought this book last year because I wanted to read more fantasy, because I realized that when I said, oh, I love reading fantasy, the only one I really could reference was like Mistborn and maybe like Red Queen. So I was like, let me read more fantasy. And so this one had one of those little blurbs that the tattered cover employees use to recommend books to you. And it said that, like, in a world where women have all the magical powers. And I said, I'm going to buy that. And it is The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. I don't know anything about this story other than the wheel of time turns and ages come and pass. There is no blurb on the back of this book. And I've decided that I'm going to keep it that way. I'm completely blind to the Wheel of Time series. The Eye of the World is the first book, and I am excited to jump into that. The final book on this entire TBR list is The Priory of an Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. I saw this book a few times at the store and was like, maybe I will read it. But then I kept going back and forth, and I was like worried it'd be some TikTok book that's like a Sarah J. Maas rewrite. And then I saw somebody online say that it's nothing like Sarah J. Maas. It's actually like crazy how long it could take you to read all these 800 pages. And I went, oh, that sounds right up my alley. So I picked it up because it also has a beautiful cover, and I was already interested in it. I love that it, like, I'm going to read this and it's going to feel like I'm reading an ancient tome about the ancient peoples of my world. This thing is huge. I'm very excited, though, to explore what's going on. What's going on? I don't even know what it's about. Still unwed, Queen Sovereign the Ninth must conceive a daughter to protect her realm from destruction, but assassins are getting closer to her door. Durian is an outsider at court. Though she has risen to the position of lady in waiting, she is loyal to a hidden society of mages. Iad keeps a watchful eye on Sabran, secretly protecting her with forbidden magic. Am I smelling a romantasy? I think that this one probably will bleed over into summer. I'm expecting it to bleed over into summer. So I am reading it last on the list for that reason. There's a whole slew of books here that I am pretty sure I may not finish by the time I make my next video like this, but this is just kind of like the plan. These are the next ones on the list. I'm just trying to chunk it down, get off my damn phone, read a book, touch grass, as they say. That is the entire TBR list. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe, like the video if you like the video, and if you dislike the video, just click off quietly and pretend you were never here, please, for my emotional well-being. Comment down below which of these books you've read and which ones you think sound interesting, or which ones you will also read this spring. Talk about your TBR. What did you read this winter that you loved? I'm gonna go now.